Thanks to the Home Depot seed program, we're going to replace this deadbolt, which is not code because it's keyed on both sides. And we're also going to replace this latch with new handles, which look very nice. And it's going to be a keypad on the outside for getting in to the lock. So stay tuned. Now, because we have an existing lock and knob, all we really need to do is just remove these, and this should be a fairly easy installation as opposed to having to drill through. And for that, I've done this with other videos, but this should be the easier install because there's no drilling involved. It's just removing the old hardware and replacing it with the new hardware. So first thing we're going to do is remove these two screws. That'll release this whole mechanism. Take these two screws out, and that will take out this deadbolt. And on the bottom, there are two screws here. We're going to release those. This whole mechanism will come out. And then again, for the latch, we'll take these two screws out. Starting with the deadbolt. Long screws. And I probably should have put painter's tape so that the tumbler doesn't drop out. Get that out of the way. Open the door. And now we're going to remove these two screws. These are nice long security screws, which is what you really want biting into the wood of the door. Not like this short one. So we're going to have to replace this short one with a longer screw. Outside mechanism is starting to pop off. There's a part here that looks like it's really stuck on. So we'll take the latch out of the way. And let's see. We're going to have to pop that off, otherwise we can't work with the new one. And there it goes. Very nice lock, just not legal. For this new installation, we have the inside locking mechanism and also the container that controls how the lock works and batteries. The back plate that secures this tumbler and the electronic to the door. And finally the latch and associated screws and keys. So first thing I'm going to do is put this tumbler into the electronic lock face, get that on the door, and you see it has a gasket, which is really nice. There's a wiring that we have to thread through and make sure it goes through this knockout. So that's going to go through the door, and then eventually that'll mate up right in there. And there's a little mark on this. Let's see if you can see it here. The red. You see that little red? That's going to face towards you when you go to insert it in here. But we'll get to that in a moment. First, we have to deal with the outside of the lock, which is the face, tumbler going into the face, going through the deadbolt. And the deadbolt can be extended for two different sizes, where this is a standard. What standard? Who knows what standard is? This size is correct, the way it's configured. By the way, there is an up arrow on this, so you got to make sure that it's going in the right direction. But there's some knockouts that are further in, And these latches accommodate that by allowing you to turn, and that makes it longer. So now it's 2 3/4 versus 2 5/8. But for our situation, we're going to go with the shorter version because that's what works for us. And again, don't forget that there is an up and a downside to this, and you want to have that arrow pointing up when you insert it into the latch. We grab our deadbolt latch, insert it into place, and now we're going to take our screws, and I did find one that was longer, and we're going to drive these in. And I don't drive them all the way in, so I want to make sure I get the alignment right. And because somebody previously installed these, it should be flush, and it is. So that's not an issue. So now we're ready to add the rest of the hardware that goes in here. So I get my plate, run the wire underneath. Make sure we run the wire underneath the latch. The tumbler has a blade, and that blade needs to line up with that horizontal opening. And one little trick I use is just to apply some painter's tape to hold things in place while you're working on them. So sliding in the tumbler should be fairly easy. Now I'm going to come around the back side, and we're going to put our back plate here. Use the screws that are provided to attach. This back plate also has an up arrow, so you got to make sure you follow that. And then these screws are going here and here. And then this little notch out is for taking the electric wire through, and your tumbler tongue is going to go through here. Got to make sure that this wire does not get pinched anywhere in this process. Now you line up the screws and you try to get them to catch. And let me tell you, having the painter's tape on the other side helps, because usually this is a process in which the front tumbler just keeps on dropping out on you. And once the screws have caught, then you can drive them in with a drill or a screwdriver. When you go to drive in the screws, make sure that you're holding everything so it's flush. The driver does make short work of these very long screws. And now you look, make sure it's straight to the sides, horizontal, so it doesn't look crooked. And then you can finalize the screws. And I think it's a little crooked on the inside, so I'm adjusting for that ever so slightly. I have mine set at about a number 3. I am going to put a Phillips on it just to see if it feels torqued enough for me. I make sure they're nice and snug. Same thing with the latch. Okay, I'm happy. Those are nice and tight. So now what's left is to get the electronics hooked up. And that's taking this wire with the little red. Oh, yeah, it's barely visible on this one. On some of the other ones, it's quite noticeable. and you insert that into place. And it goes into the plug pretty easy. Then what you're going to do is you're going to route this cable in here so that you take up most of the slack. Because again, you don't want this getting pinched and damaged. And then you're just going to align this tongue with the inside. Make sure if you have excess cable that you might have to feed it inside, or maybe even double back on itself in here. Let's try that. Okay, now this sits. There are two screws that go here and here that hold this mechanism to that back plate. And these screws don't have to be on super tight because it's just holding the electronics in place. I do got some tape here because of insulation that I need to move out of the way. Okay. Make sure they're snug. Plenty. Now all we have to do is add 4 AA batteries. I no longer use Duracells because they tend to leak and destroy devices. So I'm trying out the Kirklands. So far they've not leaked, so I'm happy with the product. Goes through a self-diagnostics check and you get a beep. Then you're able to program that. And just to show you, the latch works. A little stiff right here. So what I did was I hit the lock symbol and then dialed the code. And that had cycled through the mechanism. Now it just serves to lock and unlock the door. If you hit lock, it automatically locks without any combination. To unlock the door, you put in your secret code, which by default is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it unlocks for you. Make sure you change that code. To program a new code, you simply hold down the red button until it beeps. You come to the front and you enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the default code, hit the lock symbol, then you're going to hit 10, hit the lock symbol, and now you're going to enter your 6-digit code and then hit the lock symbol again. And that should program it with your new personal code. By the way, configuring the lock is also inside the cover in case you lose the instruction sheet. It snaps into place. These little spring clips on both sides hold it in place. So in the future, when you get a low battery indicator, you squeeze the 2 clips and the cover comes right off. With our lock complete, we take off the painter's tape. It doesn't fall off. And now we're going to work on this one, which is, again, just taking out those 2 screws, the latch screws. I found myself some long bits so I can use my driver. Make sure that the Phillips does line up. And hold this down so that the screw comes out. And if you want to repurpose this, try not to scratch that. And you still may have to turn these by hand to get them completely out, or use a Phillips driver. In this case, there's very little room to come in straight, so you're always coming in at an angle with these. So that's out. The other side should release and also come out. In comparing the old latch to the new, we see the configuration is different. So we're going to have to remove this latch and put this one in its place. We simply remove the screws. And the old latch comes out. We insert the new latch, making sure that since the door closes this way, we don't want to catch the door with the flat edge. We want the sloped side. Insert that in place. Take our new screws, and I'm going to use the drill because I don't want to overdrive these. The mechanism with the screw holes obviously goes on the inside. That leaves the other one on the outside. We line up. And now we're ready to put the other side and screw it in. We locate the screws that come with the kit. Insert the first one. And then of course, the handle's in the way, so just turn the handle. All right, and then these will line up with the door, and like before, you're going to just catch them manually before you use a Phillips driver to secure them. As always, I check with the Phillips driver to make sure they're in plenty tight. Tight. Feels a little loose, which I don't like, but it is secure on this side. It's just a function of the mechanism. Not too impressed with that. Door locks. We're secured. Because this lock set was replacing an older lock set, installation was fairly simple. We replaced the deadbolt, the latch, the handle, and the latch. We left the plates on the door frame alone, and of course all new hardware on the inside. In summing up this project, I really like the look of the Defiant. We have these throughout our home, and they seem to work quite well, very reasonably priced. I am a little bit disappointed in this handle for two reasons. One, the old handle actually was keyed, and it would have been nice to have just kept that. But two, this just feels a little bit too loose, and I'm somewhat disappointed in that. It doesn't affect the function of it whatsoever, but just note that it does rattle within its holding. But would I recommend it? Oh, absolutely. I think this is just a great lock mechanism, and you can get these without the handle. Probably save yourself a little bit of money there. If you found this video interesting or useful, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, subscribe, because if you join the subscription team, you keep the commercials out of the middle of these videos. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.